Yeah.
What's going on, everybody? How
j-
has how's your week been? With this all this spicy news, what do you think?
just straight into it, bro. No small talk. You just want to
Straight
go
into it.
straight into it.
Everybody wants to talk about this or hear
Hold
about
on,
this.
though. Hold on.
I don't have
Hold
much
on. I
thoughts
gotta
about it.
warm
But
up. Dude. Hold on. Let me turn on my space heater. It's cold out
there's a
here.
heater.
Hold on. Yeah, dude. It's. I feel like the times are exciting. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
there's a
first
lot
off,
going on.
yeah,
There's a lot of energy. It feels like there's a lot of momentum. I'm not obviously in the day to day moving freight these days, obviously, and I haven't been for a couple of years. So it's a little different feeling of or vibe, if you will.
mm-hmm.
But I feel like just based on my conversations with folks that like people are positive at the very least. I feel like there's been a
Yeah,
lot of pessimism for a couple years, and now people are being positive. So
yeah,
I
and
think that's good.
M&A is definitely back in freight tech, and I think I tweeted that like I don't know maybe like a few weeks ago, but I think in general like the sentiment that Craig has around like the kind of the end of the recession was around something like November 8th. You got a lot of flack for it, but like I feel like it generally feels that way too.
Hmm.
Maybe people have different views or whatever on that. But honestly, it does kind of feel like we are so back. So uh,
I mean,
it really
yeah,
does.
dude, it's cool. I mean, it's. I mean, you have to think about. I mean, we were basically in like a two plus year downturn, and I mean that gets pretty crushing. And I feel like people in this industry, especially in like the day-to-day transactional roles, like working at brokerages or like working at a carrier or stuff like that, you
Yeah,
have, at least for me, I had like such a goldfish memory. When the market was good, it felt like it was always going to be good. And then as soon as it flipped, it felt like it had always been bad and was always going to be bad. You have like no memory. It's
yeah.
very, I'm
It's all
speaking
blur.
personally.
It's all
But I feel
blur.
like as an industry, we tend to just get like caught in these little cycles, and just like our mentality is just that. But if
Yeah.
you can look beyond it, I don't know, man, it feels like we're entering a new era, if you will. There's a
Not
lot
to
of
be like
interesting companies.
yeah,
I feel
not to
like
be like cliche or anything.
a lot of the last era companies are either kind of licking their wounds, gone, or
Looking
or
inward, looking inward, and
yeah,
like having to realize like, all right, we got to kind of like re, like
yeah.
kind of like transform
But I
ourselves.
think the companies that are like really starting to ascend right now are like, this is kind of the perfect time, because a lot of folks have been working for like the last 2+ years when it's been terrible. And if you can kind of like figure it out when it's terrible, then it flips. Maybe that's a wave that everyone is well positioned to ride,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
they've managed to survive, quote unquote, thus far. But I don't know, man. It's cool.
I also realized that like we haven't had like the banner for Freight on Friday up for some time now since we've been using the studio. But anyway, definitely agree with that sentiment, and I think what last week we went pretty steep on the the whole AI agents for
Yeah.
for freight brokerages and trucking companies and so forth, and that is going to continue to see a shift. We just saw yesterday or this morning, maybe even, OpenAI released
Yeah.
a phone
Have
number.
you used it yet?
I have not. I generally don't like. Well, first off, I'm not a green bubble fan. Just we'll start there. But beyond that, I just generally don't like to use. I just like to stay on encrypted, like I don't know, chat
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah,
to
okay.
the extent that I can, essentially, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, you can use I think over just regular text. You can text the phone number to ChatGPT now, and you can ask it anything and have a conversation with it. And one thing that I've always wanted was just this ability to like do group chat with ChatGPT, and that wasn't something that I don't know if you've ever done that before, but if I
You
found
mean just like have it in a text?
Yeah, like a group chat essentially, so that you can kind of like talk about.
Doesn't it have a WhatsApp channel?
It does have a WhatsApp channel too. Yeah, so
Isn't that it? Isn't that an encrypted platform?
yeah. I mean, they say it's closed source. You don't really know, obviously, but you can say iMessages is closed source too, I guess too, right? So, but
The Yeah, I called the number. I agreed to all their terms and conditions.
oh, they asked you on the phone.
Yeah. Well, they say when you call, they basically is like, if you stay on the line, you're consenting to our terms of service, um, and
That's
stuff like that.
interesting.
Which I assume just means that they're gonna literally just use the recordings to train the models. You know what I mean? To improve themselves. It was actually pretty good though. Like it's response time. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see them do this. Like, are they going to get more into the voice agent world? Like, what effect does that have on these like more vertically focused companies?
Yeah.
Like that, many of which that we could name. It's like it's interesting. I don't know. I
So
don't know.
I'm gonna give him a call real quick. Let's see how this
If
how
you're
this.
gonna patch them into the stream, can we do that? Can we
Yeah,
invite the AI, the
I
robot?
don't know if we can invite the AI, but I am gonna just call it from my phone real quick, and we'll see how this sounds.
She's
One eight
it's
hundred
it's. I'll
two
ask her what her name is. I was impolite. I didn't know.
242-8478. All right, let's see.
Hi, I'm ChatGPT, an AI assistant. Just so you know, our conversation may be reviewed for safety. By continuing this call, you agree to OpenAI's terms and privacy policy. So, how can I help you today?
Signing our souls away.
Yeah. First off, hi. How are you? And what's your name?
Hi there, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. What's on your mind today?
Oh, come on. What's your name?
Oh no. Can you
Hold
tell?
on.
Are you able to search the latest news on the internet?
I can't browse the internet right now, but I can provide information up to my last update in October 2023. Is there anything from that time you'd like to know about?
No, unfortunately not. But thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
I was
Thanks,
hoping we
AI.
can ask it. I was hoping we can ask it about the ruffles that were
No,
taking place this week.
let's pull up some of the articles about this
This
DAT deal. Where's Grace's article? I'm gonna pull this up. Let's see. Grace, if you're out there, I texted you. You should come on. I also texted Rob List because I feel like he usually has interesting opinions on the market and deals and stuff like that. I don't know if he'll have a personal opinion on this, but we'll ask him.
let's go,
Where's
Rob.
Oh,
What's up,
There he
Rob?
is.
hey guys.
Yeah, what up, bro?
Yo, how's it going? I real quick before we start, my car broke down yesterday in front of this coffee shop, and I did not know it, but the owner of the coffee shop helped me push my car to the side of the road so I wasn't blocking traffic at North and Western. So shout out Atmos Coffee Shop on North and Western. They're great. Brandon's awesome. He sells these sweet hats. So if you're in Chicago, please go support them. Good Samaritan, good dude, great coffee. So that's my number one shout out. The
All right. Well, if we're plugging hats, then I'm gonna plug Giganti and Giganti Jewelers in Springfield, Illinois. If you're in need of a fine timepiece or jewelry, and you're in the Springfield, Illinois area, hit them up. Christian, do you have anyone to plug?
No,
CH
no.
Robinson? You're wearing a CH Robinson shirt?
I am. Yeah, I am wearing CH Robinson. Shout out CH. But I forget where I got this. I think I got this at Manifest. This shirt.
So wait. So Rob, your car literally just broke down?
No, well, just like the
Is
it's
was
got
it
this.
was it is it your is it the one is it the newer one?
No, the Subaru, yeah. It's got
Yeah.
this thing that like it stops automatically at stoplights for
Yeah.
stop scanning for fuel. It just never came back on, and so it's just an issue with the battery. So I had to get it towed and put a new battery on it. And
Do you have AAA?
it's under like warranty with the Subaru
Oh,
dealers.
good.
So they just like showed up and towed, and it was like all in all, it was a pretty fast experience. But I just like was so embarrassed. I put the hazards on and behind my car, like trying to direct traffic. So I'm just like, it's the middle of rush hour. Like I'm just like, oh man, like
What were
Uh,
you doing on North and Western? Where were you going?
so our office is in the Hancock building. So obviously I'm not there today. And I dropped my son off at daycare, and it's like a straight shot into the city. And then today's it's our son's daycare party. So it'll be fun to go and hang out with a bunch of little infants and toddlers and whatever this afternoon. So we're
Hell yeah, dude.
in the work from home stuff. So it's good. I gotta figure out how to blur my background. You can see my basement in disarray. My son got the office, and now my office is now a closet in the basement when I'm working from home. So it's not quite as glamorous. But
So
no.
Rob, you heard about the news that was going on, all the ruffles on Freight X this week? What are your thoughts on it? Do you think that is this a common occurrence where companies have language in their contracts that is particularly kind of I guess the way that it's being portrayed is that it's restrictive, and from what I read, it seemed to be restrictive as well. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that it's language in your. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, right? But like, there's language
Yeah.
in your contract that's also what's the enforcement mechanism, and so DAT can say, you can't share your data with anybody else or whatever. But how are they going to enforce that provision? How would they know that you shared that data? What constitutes sharing data? Is it overly broad? If they were to sue someone for it, would a court uphold it? So I think that there's a lot of considerations that kind of come in, and we see that we're on my side more on like freight contracts, right? So in the middle of an RFP right now, you get someone going through, you got to read the contract. Some of them are 40 pages long, and you can kind of go through like, all right, these provisions, like I understand why the language is wanted here. Like, what does that language actually do in effect? How does that go? So I don't think that it's that uncommon for that sort of language to be there. It's probably in a lot of terms of service agreements that you don't realize when you click through there. I don't see there's any way that the DAC could really enforce that provision unless you were to build a competitor on it. And so I think that the one area where it did have teeth, and I'm not sure that was the exact provision, but DAT was in a long lawsuit with Convoy prior to the Convoy collapse. I kind of heard like rustling in the wind that one of the reasons for the Convoy collapse was because they were unable to use the DAT to cover loads, and also probably made their technology a lot stronger because of that. So the language itself is kind of
just rewind for a second. DAT was Convoy was unable to use DAT. What? Because DAT saw them as a competitor,
so
essentially.
DAT and Convoy had some sort of deal together, and I'm not
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
going
yeah,
but they were in a lawsuit. So they took data from the DAT, Convoy did, to help build their
yeah. Okay,
Convoy for
yeah. I'm
broker
remembering now.
product. When that went out, DAT was like, well, if you're just putting loads on the on Convoy, not on the DAT, then that impacts our product. We have an agreement not to do that. You violated that agreement. And it's pretty black and white. Like
Mhm.
that Convoy was in violation of those terms because you're trying to compete or create a competing product. I did see like Andrew Silver kind of made a similar point. He commented on Craig Fuller's post, and there's some little ad hominem attacks in there on Craig, which I don't think are fully fair. But his point was like the people that are liking this comment and story are people that are competing products with DAT. So it's I don't know if what brought this out is the acquisition of trucker tools. I don't know what brought this out is DAT trying to enforce provision or going to a large broker carrier and saying, hey, you can't feed your data into truck stop or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, like the fact that Craig is obviously both on Freightwaves and on Sonar, he obviously has a competing product, but the fact that he comments on what's taking place at DAT, I don't see a reason why like that puts him like that makes him like bad
No,
person, or he
I,
shouldn't be doing that, because at the end of the day, like if it wasn't maybe for Craig, then maybe this wouldn't be on people's
I
radars
think
either.
I mean I think to me I think when it comes to marketplaces, like DT at its core is just like their marketplace, and the whole reason they're the 9 million pound gorilla in the room is because they own so much of the market share, right? Like they are, and they own the eyeballs and the attention of a lot of carriers. You know what I mean? And carriers are very hard to corral cohort, if you will. And so but the difference between them and in my mind and some of the more modern quote unquote they would probably argue with that word, but like what I perceive to be like the newer generation of marketplaces, which are like Uber Freight and the Convoy and the other digital freight brokers, right? Like those guys, for all the problems they've had and all the criticism we could levy against them for like how they've acquired and stuff like that, and what they've done with capital they've raised, they've still got a loyal, like they're definitely carriers who who were using Convoy, you know what I mean? And they at least the ones I've talked to all really really liked it. I felt like it was either you really really like it and that's the first place you go because the experience is good and maybe you're more used to using your phone and stuff like that. Like I feel like that is like that younger generation is probably leaning more toward that sort of experience. But and the DAT, they probably still use DAT, but it's not the same experience. It's not as mobile first. Like at least my perception of it is, right? It's probably a little different now versus when I was last using it, whatever, 2 years ago. But like I feel like buying Trucker Tools, who is like an app like that drivers use, probably closer to something that the carriers, the Convoy and the Uber Freight carriers are, right? It's like kind of a similar cohort. And also they have just the natural install base because carriers are being naturally onboarded to that platform in order to work with brokers, right? So it's kind of a new angle of like acquisition for them. And it's also probably more a move in the direction of having a tool that's more like the Ubers and the Convoys, right? More full stack, if you will. And so like it seems to me like it's a pretty smart, probably. I mean, well, I guess we'll see how it plays out, but to me it seems like a good move
from DAT's perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, I don't like. I probably would disagree. In short term, it might be, but every time somebody has done a restrictive maneuver,
how often does DAT buy companies?
I can't say every time.
How often does DAT buy companies?
Sorry,
Rob, do you have any? How many companies has DAT bought? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. They've been around forever. I think that the restrictive language is one thing, but really the restrictive language only comes into play. You look at like just the Sonar product and the DAT product, and I think my thought, and this could be incorrect, but I think that the Sonar product is more for Bloomberg types, where it's sort of like, hey, if you're trying to use shipment data, tracking data, volume data, tender, like you want to use that to see how that impacts the broader economy and roll that into your hedge fund portfolio and how you make stock decisions and things like that. I think that's the market that Sonar is trying to go after way more so than the DAT. And DAT is more for practitioners, right? They make their money off of drivers, off of carriers, off of brokers, and to a certain extent off of shippers. So in terms of Trucker Tools, bringing that in, and kind of the vision is that you have a competitor for Convoy for brokers, competitor for the Uber Freight Access. That's something that you could build out. It's going to take some work to get that together, but just on the strength of brand, I would trust the DAT with that sort of product as a broker more than I would trust Uber or Convoy, because they are direct competitors, right? Where DAT is everybody's sort of on that sandbox. For the Sonar, if I'm Sonar, I'm like, well, if everything is now in a closed loop and the driver's data gets shared right back in and all these things, and they don't need this rate index anymore, I probably get away from these rate indexes and pricing, because now I'm making a dollars per transaction, which is a much better business model. And that information is not flowing in, and I can't get that information from DAT directly for my product. Then it really could kill a lot of of your Trucker Tools or not your Trucker Tools of Truck Stop Sonar, because it restricts that data flowing out. If it says that, hey, you're in here, you can't share your data out and all that stuff. So that I think it's more of an existential threat. I don't think it's an immediate threat. DAT has to execute, and that has to be the playbook that they need to execute on. And I don't know if that's what they're trying to do. But the restriction is it's just going to change and the market's changing anyway, but it's just going to change the market. But it kind of has to change. It's sort of that closed loop is what kills a lot of that fraud and everything else. But
yeah, I mean, this is definitely a move to like be more quote unquote like full stack. You know what I mean? Like, because they've got all the tracking capabilities. They've got, I mean, they're just a kind of a complementary suite of products, probably. I don't know if Trucker Tools had their own internal marketplace. Carrie, if you're listening, maybe you text me. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I don't know how often carriers are booking loads on there, or if they even can, to be honest. I know about all the tracking and all that stuff, but
how did either of you guys know if it was mentioned in these articles that were written about how long this provision has been in the contract for?
No,
yeah, that's a good question. I've heard varying stories on that. I don't actually know. So who knows?
I think when I think about that, here's how I saw it. Like as soon as Craig came out and basically started bringing awareness to this. I mean, obviously I saw he was getting fired up about this. Everybody did, and like putting those types of restrictions where you can't let the other market, you restrict competition in the market. It makes that competition, like that, in my opinion, that much more likely to try to succeed and overcome that obstacle, and then actually end up like beating you. And instead of like just being in the arena and competing in an open market and trying to provide the best product, best services, and showing apples to apples comparisons about why we're better than somebody else, putting those restrictions, it's like that's just only like a patch, a temporary, I guess you can say, fix, right? Just to hold down the moat, to show another couple quarters of profit.
I just don't think DAT thinks that way. I feel like they think long term.
Seem like they do, but
they have the luxury of. I mean, maybe they don't view it this way. I don't know what they're saying internally. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, yeah,
I imagine what they're saying internally is like, we're not paying any attention to any of this noise. Like, for example, I feel like they're in a strong position. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know if anybody except for Ken is on X. So I, for the longest time, thought that Ken was the CEO.
Think about it. Yeah, I mean, like when I went to DACCON for the first time in whatever November, I guess it was, or maybe October. I was like, dang, like DAT has all of these people. You know what I mean? And when I think of DAT and the internet, I think of Ken. You know,
literally,
and the rest. They have so many other. They've I don't know how many employees they have, but they have a lot of employees. You know what I mean? And they're like building a bunch of stuff. And it's easy when your only interaction with them, for me, from my perspective, is using DAT power for a couple of years, like, and just calling carriers and booking loads and stuff like that. Like, my experience with them is a lot different than, probably most. Well, actually, hold on. Grace is going to come on in 10 minutes. So we'll talk about her opinions on this.
Yeah, Rob, I don't want to extend, like, also discount, right, like a lot of what DAT has offered to the market, because there's a reason people are like, there's a reason they became big, right? They were offering a product and service that people in the market were in need of and started to use. So I don't want to discount that part, but this kind of goes towards a pattern of like, when you do become big and you decide to just stay still and try to maintain that position without innovating further, you just start to kind of go after starting to try to prevent other people from coming into your arena, as opposed to like not even maybe inviting them, but just allowing there to be competition and going towards like, how do we make
well, I mean, why would they don't want competition? They want to own the market. You know what I mean?
Like, nobody ideally wants competition, right? Like, it's idea,
I know, but I think these guys, I think freight tech is still like, maybe the newer generation is a lot more integration focused, if you will. and so they naturally want to work with partners a lot more. And I feel like DAT still definitely wants to work with certain partners, but
Mhm.
like they need to grow their market share. And when you're at the scale they're at, growing their market share, is not trivial. You know what I mean? Like they have to figure that out. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's cool. And they have that new CEO, and he started. He's not been there. I think he started as like something else before he's the CEO. But I mean, he's like a pretty sharp dude,
Who is the
So I
DAT
think
CEO? Jeff
his name is
Clements.
like Jeff Clements.
Yeah.
Yeah, I briefly met him at the DACCon, and talked to him for a couple minutes, and he seems like a sharp, really sharp guy.
He previously seems like he was the VP and general manager of Walmart's marketplace. That's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
he's no dummy. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be cool. Let's real quick, Rob, before Grace comes on, we talk about this more. What's the market looking like these days? Like, how are things?
Yeah, I mean it's up and down. I think that fraud is finally kind of taken hold on a lot of shippers, where they're. I think that we're seeing there's some tightness that's coming where there's less carriers around, there's less there, so there's some positive signs. I think also a lot of shippers are taking a look at how much of their business is routed by brokers, and it's hey, how much of this am I going to get double invoiced for? And if a broker was out of business, is that there? So there's sort of it's a strangle on both sides where there's more pressure, at least for brokers as market makers, and that like shippers are wary of that. They've been burned by a lot of brokers, especially as brokers fail and go out of business, which is part of the market correction. Shippers get left holding the bill, and if 70% of your freight is routed through a broker, now 70% of your freight invoices there's some level of risk, and you don't necessarily know or understand.
Meaning you will have paid the broker, they go out of business, and they didn't pay the carrier.
Right.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
they double brokered, and then the underlying carrier tries to go back and pursue it or whatever. So a lot of that fraud that happens, even if the carrier doesn't go out of business, if there's an actual fraud scheme, you don't realize that for 3, 4, 5, 6 months out, right? Because that's how long it takes to track that down. So I think a lot of that bill is coming due, which is restricting a lot of carriers. So I was looking at scorecards this week for some of our larger shippers, and it gives you like, hey, your rank out of here's how many there are. And for our largest shippers, they're cutting close to a quarter of their providers have been cut from the start of this year to the end of this year. Either they got cut for lack of service, or they went out of business, or whichever. So that's part of the correction, is that there's still a lot of pain coming in. I don't think that there's some upward price movement coming into the holidays on carriers, but also a lot of it is shifting buying patterns. The one thing that COVID changed consumer behavior is that if you go to a store and they're out of product, it's kind of like, okay. If the thing is like, hey, I don't have it at Christmas, it's gonna be 2 days late. It's sort of it's not the, hey, everything's in the world, it's got to get in the store, and that buying pattern is what drives a lot of spot rates, and spot boards in general have been pretty dead all year. So I'm optimistic for next year.
Are you seeing like any good spot activity?
No, there's unless it's some sort of like specialized like project or things like that. Like but for the most part, for large shippers, the spot boards aren't active, and I think part of that is driven at least part by the success of a lot of those quoting automation tools, where suddenly.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not just that there's no spot freight because the market isn't great. It's that it's maybe just being routed differently and captured quickly, and it never even goes to their quoting boards. You know what I mean? Like,
right, and the stuff where it's like, the reason you want a spot board is you want a human to look at it and say, hey, I have a truck for it. You don't necessarily want an automated system to put a rate on everything, which is what you're getting. And from a broker perspective, it's like, well, I want to quote everything, and then.
So I mean, shippers are getting a ton of like of potentially noise, like delivered to them almost instantly.
And constantly, and then there's even whole suites of products for sales facilitation, where it's sort of like email like 20 times a day. And I don't know how many emails that you get from people that are trying to sell you sales tools. I mean, it's
A lot.
constant where it's just like I get 50 to 100 emails a day, and for stuff that I'm not even remotely interested in, but it's just then for if you're a shipper, that's got to be 10, 20x. So there's I think the market in terms of customer acquisition, it's hard, and that like the landscape is different in terms of how you're viewed as a provider. It's a shifting landscape. What does a broker mean for a shipper? What does an asset carrier mean? How do I route this? What's my risk bucket? I think there's a lot of reevaluation that's coming in, and then there's also just a lot of tightness at a lot of companies. People are buying less. The economy is not in a great spot overall. There's less demand. There's less goods moving. So there's a lot of headwinds, and you want to kind of end it with something rosy, but you really need a demand surge somewhere to kind of push things forward.
I'll do a quick just like Shipper CRM selfless plug here, but like obviously Shipper CRM is a product that we sell to brokers and carriers to help you get in touch with these shippers, like solicitation essentially, right? But one of the things that I noticed myself personally before we started Shipper CRM was this fact that like shippers are getting bombarded, and when you take a look at like some of that, what the outreach actually looks like, these like people that are reaching out to these shippers are filling their inbox with just straight noise, in the sense that like literally they have no idea anything about the company. They just get and buy like lists of 50,000 leads, and they run that through just a giant bulk email send with the same template, and the template's not even like formatted correctly. It's like all caps, 5 different colors. Like, why would anybody ever want to read that? And so we took that kind of, just since it was brought up, I just wanted to address that. But like we took the perspective where if you do educate yourself about who you're reaching out to, what they do, where they have a presence around the United States particularly, so that you can actually provide information like, hey, I might have capacity in those areas. It's at least giving a higher quality, it's actually being more informative to the shipper than it is like, hey, just give me your freight. And
Rob, I mean,
that's what I think Journey's so good for you guys, and I think that the aligning with sales training along with the outreach 100%. is it's a huge game changer in terms of it changes something to a numbers game into a quality game. It's still it's like, all right, well, the hit rate is 1%, so I got to do more.
I mean, you have to also think about like the context for those emails, right? Like if they're buying, say, use your example where somebody's buying a list, that list likely contains dubious information about the people that they're emailing, right? They don't have a ton of context necessarily. And so that means, the outreach will necessarily lack the personalized context that's useful for having the email be much more targeted, be much more personalized, be much more relevant to the party that's receiving them. You know what I mean? Because not only would having more context affect what's actually in the content, but it would also affect who's receiving the email in the first place. And your tool and an effective knowledge of how to utilize it with sales training will allow you much more context about who you're reaching out to. And so naturally, I think the quality of outreach will increase, if you know how to properly leverage those sorts of tools. And the hope is, I don't anticipate the flood of emails will stop anytime soon. It'll probably only increase. But like, if you can figure out a way to make it your message that's delivered much more high quality and more likely to be opened, you leveraging tools like yours and effective training, I mean, that could potentially be a game changer.
Yeah, and at the same time, right? Like if you look at it from the other perspective, shippers are looking for, they are also looking for quality capacity too, right? So they're looking and they're going to all these different tools and providers for, what are the rates, and then carrier sourcing tools as well. So there is this aspect of the other side of, the coin, which is shippers are looking for, the right partners as well. And deliberate outreach is, I think, the type of outreach that you want.
Rob, have you guys closed more business this year? Are you guys doing well?
Yeah, I mean, we're hiring, we're growing people. Headcount is consistently up year over year. I mean, the it's a tough market. Like, we're moving more loads, but for less money. So
Yeah.
it's you have to grow volume. But I think that's one thing
But
that
you've managed to grow volume.
yeah, and I'm it's not always pretty how you get there, but for us, like, we're the leading and only provider of reefer intermodal in Mexico. So that's been nice, having the assets, being able to sell that, being
Yeah.
a one company in that space, with us in the CPKC. So that's been really good for us. We're revamping our website. So the website itself has changed. We gotta, like, change all the text on it, because it's all like chat GPT. It doesn't make any sense.
Do
But
you find that shippers actually like look at your guys' website?
Good question.
yeah, so I think that with just the shifting sales piece of it, you have to make yourself accessible and able to find. And if a shipper does gonna put their neck out and onboard you, they're gonna do research on you. So that's why it's important for me. And I appreciate being invited on here. And you want to leave little digital trails of breadcrumbs. Hey, what are you doing?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
is
yeah.
it? What's on LinkedIn? Having some appearances. We do a lot of stuff with Loyola University, and just sort of, we want to build our brand there, but also provide value to students and things like that. So we want to. There's two ways of sort of standing above the noise, and either you're yelling above it, which is certainly one way. It's not necessarily our style. Or you sort of, like, build something that is attractive, and you try to attract shippers to it by just sort of putting out
Mhm.
what you're doing, what the specific value proposition is, and where it is. So
Mhm.
we're trying
Mhm.
to take the
Mhm.
second track. And that's going to be multi-year strategy. So we're kind of 1 year into it, but that's why it's important for us to build the Maca brand separate from Armstrong. Is, hey, here's unique things, here's what we're doing. We're still part of Armstrong. It's all of those good things. But for us, it's and I think that's going to be increasingly important, because the sales tools are all going to get better and better and better. When you have AI enabled sales reps that are going to be calling and soliciting
Yeah.
and selling all
Yeah.
these things,
Yeah.
like, it's like, well, like, it's a numbers game, and I can't win that game. So you got to try to play a different game, and go at it that way.
All right, we got Grace here real quick. We'll add her in.
Sounds good. I'm
What's up,
gonna
Grace?
hop off for another call, but Grace, great seeing you, and good to chat, guys.
Cool.
See you, Rob.
Bye-bye.
Grace, where are you right now?
Well, first off, I'm in Lansing. I'm going to my
You haven't made it
well,
very far.
yeah, I'm like pretty much here. I'm just it would be annoying to do this in their house. And yeah, welcome everyone to my fresh face.
All
Enjoy
good.
that.
Yeah. So what's happened this week? How you been? What's going on?
Wait, what has happened this week? I mean, is any big news? I haven't
Any big news?
What's your perspective on what's transpired in the last couple weeks?
Well, I think it's showing some great signs of 2025, right? I mean, honestly, a lot of this stuff has been accumulating for me behind the scenes. Is probably like the day we got back from F3. Not to say that's what peaked all this energy, but hey,
It very much could have. It very much could have.
I'm gonna throw that out there. And so it's interesting, like going into December, I was like, okay, so if this is saying it is the end of the year, so a lot of this stuff does close right around this time. So not to be fully surprised, but I mean, including the FedEx stuff that happened last night. I mean, I think again, we're going into a year where there's going to be a lot of interesting strategic moves. And as someone whose job kind of relies on that, I'm very excited about it. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be, I think, a fun time, and just it's interesting to see. We saw a couple of years ago, right? Like visibility was the big deal. Now I think we're seeing a little bit more of this AI, happy robot stuff is going to be a bigger deal going into this year. So, let's see how much money's thrown into that, and I'm sure we'll cycle it through. Or in a couple of years from now, we'll start seeing those being so.
Yeah.
It feels like the beginning of like a new cycle, if anything
The,
like that.
the M&A cycle is definitely heating back up from what it seems like, and I think it's only going to get. I feel like it's going to. Well, it's either there's a small window, or it's just going to continue to keep heating up. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think from at least the people I've talked to in the industry, I think it will start heating up. Again, all it takes is a crazy black swan event to change. So we'll see what
Right.
happens. But being the administration that is coming into the White House, I don't see that hurting that situation. If anything, maybe pushing more of that along.
Yeah.
I think I'm really excited, like more of like these FedEx type of deals. Like, unfortunately, the Kroger Albertson did die, but I'd like to see more M&A activity.
FedEx spun off their LTL, right? That's what they're doing.
Oh, that's they didn't do it, but I believe they discussed that that's what they're gonna do, right? They announced that
Okay, got
that's
it. Yeah,
so I don't think it's
yeah, yeah,
like today done, but yeah,
yeah.
eventually that will follow through.
And why did that cause their stock to soar? Is it just simply because the LTL is not like
It's not their
that?
core business, really.
Okay.
Yeah, and it could potentially, I mean, depending on how that's split too, could be positive for them as well. So I think it's a positive sign, right? They're gonna be right, if not the largest LTL shipper now because of that. So
Yeah, yeah.
um
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what happens there for sure.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so let's talk about this DAT deal.
Yeah.
I read your article,
It's a good article.
and and yeah, I mean, I assume you've
Risk.
been kind of in the loop on this for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, thank you to that team for giving us the exclusive on that story. It's I think especially the three of us here, it's really exciting to know Carrie is a part of this,
Yeah.
right? I'm trying to
Shout out. Great.
remember I want to say maybe Andrew posted about this yesterday. Someone did, just discussing, right, the fact that I think she could be really key and really helpful in helping DAT kind of maybe enter this new era that they speak of. Again, right, we do have the aspects that Craig brought up, and I know there's been contract issues with customers as well, just in terms of pricing. So will that stuff change? I would hope so. I'd
Carrie
love to
is
see.
Carrie is
Yeah.
dangerous, like in a good way. Like
Yeah,
she's
exactly. But if she
really
is
smart.
utilized in the right way, and that's the problem, I think, that a lot of these situations maybe don't follow through all the way, is because you don't use those assets in the correct manner. And so she is, I think, a key part of what this could grow into. So I really hope that she is utilized in that way. From speaking to the team directly, it sounds like they are. They do have a new CEO as of what, June, I think, is when Jeff took
Like it,
that
yeah.
role. So signs point to an environment that they could improve on, and I think they could get to a point that they prove maybe these situations wrong, or prove maybe the market wrong, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Why do you think they made this purchase?
I do agree. I think a lot of it is I think the app aspect for carriers is huge. I think the biometrics aspect that was brought up by Dooner, and I can't remember who's posted, is a big part of.
What was the
Could be.
biometrics aspect of it?
So the fact that right now DAT is also working on using, I'm just assuming, the data altogether to basically, when you would sign on or get onto DAT, it'd be the same as, like, getting onto your bank account, using whether it's your fingerprint or your Face ID, right, to
Mhm.
get on these sites, which I think is awesome. I mean, there's security within. Well, we could talk about our phones, right? That could be a whole
Sure.
like
I don't.
day
I
discussion.
I don't think
I am
that.
interested in your point of view, actually building some of this stuff.
Yeah, I don't think, at least when it comes to Apple, I think they keep all the biometrics on the device for security reasons, and I really hope that that's definitely the case. And knowing Apple,
Yeah.
that's got to be the case. So, and like, just as an example, like I have friends that work there, and when they, like, for example, Apple Watch, like when they're testing any improvements to the Apple Watch, like they can't use real data, and so that's a really big problem for them. Is like not being able to have any real data from users to test things with. But anyway, like back to this, this topic of like the biometrics, like the sign-ins. I think the streamlining aspect, like the sign-ins of facial recognition, or thumbprints, like I don't think that stuff necessarily gets shared, but it does help streamline like onboarding, or streamlines sign-ins, and so it's a low friction and point of entry, and make from DAT's perspective, it's like that's this huge user base which can basically get onto a network very seamlessly, which makes it makes sense from that perspective of the topic.
I mean, so like I would be curious to know what that's usage is broken down between desktop and mobile. I'd just be curious to know. My gut tells me that they have they're overweight desktop. You see a lot of I mean, like I feel like modern applications see a lot of, I mean, we're not talking about I guess I'm not talking about B2B SaaS tools. Like I feel like those are overweight desktop, but I feel like mobile is becoming more and more important, and their user base is definitely probably could heavily utilize more mobile. And I feel like buying trucker tools is like buying this natural big install base as well. And so instead of trying to just have to climb the hill of retraining your current users, you kind of naturally will jump ahead in that direction by integrating these tools, this new platform. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they start to weave things together over time. I imagine that's going to be a delicate process, and I have no context, so I don't know what they're going to do. But I mean, it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool to watch them try to figure it out. Hopefully, I think they could. I mean, if they do figure it out, then it should prove to be a good move for them.
It is still running too as like a separate entity, right? So it's you don't have to have DAT to have trucker tools. I don't know how long if that will stay forever, but
it's a good good brand name, right?
Yes, 100%. And I think a big part of it too is even more so the innovation of the team, and who's building the tools, right? Bringing those people on board as well.
Definitely. Grace, what are your thoughts, just in general around, obviously there's that contract, restriction, when you when you think about companies competing, in the market, is this something that might hurt DAT in the long run? How do you think they're thinking about it internally when they came up with this provision? I mean, I would assume they had to have gone over the idea of what backlash might look like from this. But how do you think about it? Is this going to be helpful? Can they pull this off? Can they keep this on going forever?
So it's interesting, Reed. I'm about to bring something up that I've kind of worked on and looked at in the past. So I've been thinking about going back to writing this article. I just think I'm very interested in this industry, and honestly, I think this is something that Craig brings up that everyone should be considering in their own just personal lives as well, is how data is stored and moved within this industry. There's a lawsuit that is now settled between JB Hunt and another tech company out there, Truck Smarter. And Reed knows, because I've brought this up to him a couple times, and I was kind of working on it behind the scenes. And it was lightly kind of the same situation where at the time Truck Smarter was using their carriers logins to scrub and of course take data in, and again, this did settle, but the lawsuit is public, so you can go look at it and everything.
Seems like there's a lot of hesitation on what to say here, but
Well, because I do work with a truck smarter team, so it's like
Oh, okay,
I
okay.
don't want to
Yeah,
say
fair enough. Fair enough.
and again, when you talk about lawsuits, like allegedly, right, situation. So, a long story short, there was nothing illegal about that because it was actually in the contracts that they could
Right.
do that. So
Nothing like
JB Hunt had caught them doing that. And part of JB Hunt's argument is they were not just going after Truck Smarter, but they're also going after the carriers because the carriers in their agreement with JB Hunt can't do that. They can't
Hmm.
share that access. And so I think just in general, people need to realize when they're getting applications, when they're getting new technologies, they do need to read that through and see what is theirs and what isn't theirs.
Yeah.
And with the DAT contract, right? It's a situation where it's like, will they go after you like they did after Convoy? Now, I think Convoy was likely making more of a tool with that information than just like sharing it, kind of that's like brought up in the terms. So I think there's a little bit of difference of like the average user and what Convoy was doing.
Mhm.
But on a good day and with a good lawyer, they can go after you for it, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
There's
are
no.
they
It doesn't
ask?
seem like
Are
there's
people
grounds though to go after a competitor of that their mutual customer might be using though, right? Like
a
it's
hundred? Yeah, and exactly. And I think, and again, the thing I hate about contracts and legal things is, and I mean, this is even for laws across the United States, like it's about enforcement, right? Is it being enforced? So,
yeah.
is DAT, are you enforce if someone reaches out to you and wants to share that data, are you giving them permission if they're following the directions and asking for the permission like you ask? Are you saying no to everyone? Are you selecting certain customers to say no to? Is it across the board? So it definitely is not a good thing because Craig's 100% right. It can take you for that. And it's you're scaling and growing, like he kind of said, like if you're a small, medium-sized player and you're trying to grow a name in this industry, like that's probably not a great thing to have in your contract. So
Hmm.
again, I would tell people to read all their contracts and realize just even when they're signing up for an app, like we just talked about the Truck Tools app, not that Truck Tools app has anything in there, but there are, I know, applications out there that are likely taking advantage of your data in some other way too,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
might be hurting your reputation behind the scenes. So um it's something, again, I think that's hurting this industry, but probably hurting a lot of other industries too when it comes to who owns that data and who truly gets to handle that and manipulate that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's it's interesting because the like if you kind of zoom out and say and ask yourself like how should this market function? Like in a perfect world, if you could just snap your fingers and like get the ideal setup to get our transportation network to move, because at the end of the day, like it's very easy to get kind of like zoomed in to like the status quo of the market, you know what I mean, and how things are, which is companies are very closeted about what they share. It's not always easy to share, even if they want to share, because there's all these benefits they could get from sharing. It's not always easy to do that, right? And so like and it doesn't help that companies are very restrictive because naturally they need to be restrictive to a degree because that's their business,
Yeah.
and when they've made tons of investment into building tools and infrastructure, like naturally they want less people to use other stuff and they want more people to use their stuff, you know what I mean, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But like it's just interesting to say, like, to hold how it is against like how it should be, you know what I mean? And to me it's like, in a perfect world everything would be in one place, and we'd be able to like make matches between entities that like otherwise would never know about each other. And like it's so there is this kind of like barrier between like probably how things should be and how things are based on like how businesses need to operate. So I don't know. I think it's going to be cool. Grace, you talked about it being like a new era. I mean, it pretty much kind of is. I think there's a lot of companies have died, carriers, brokers, technology providers, it's been a challenging couple of years for folks, and we're kind of like hopefully rising out of the ashes into like a new thing. And everyone kind of like, hand waves about, all like venture capital investment and like it being, we poured billions of dollars down the drain. I don't think that's the right way to look at this at all. I don't think that's the right way to look at this. It's like, in order to progress, you have to spend and you have to invest, and you're making a bet, and that bet might not pay off. In fact, it probably won't pay off, and
For sure.
especially when you're fighting to make a significant sea change in an industry that like is very difficult to do that in, because you interface with such a massive set of people, and there's so many variables, and it's just such a large market. I mean, it's just, people act like this shit's easy, but it's just not. It's not. Like, it's really not. So it's exciting to see kind of like more stuff happen. So it's going to be cool to be part of it with you all. And Grace, if you've got any juice, you know where to bring it.
I think that's a good way to end it up here. We're up on time.
Oh, you guys don't want to talk about co-brokering?
I would love that. Maybe next time.
Next time.
Transparency.
We'd love to have you back on Grace more frequently. So this is awesome. Thanks so much for coming up.
All right.
Of course, yeah.
Thanks, Grace. See ya.
Yeah. Have a good holiday.
Yeah. You too. See you.